Leadership Summit as part of International Women's Day celebrations. Let's take you there live where the Minister of International Relations, Naledi Pandor, is speaking.
To be reinforced. So we agreed greater action together to support women in areas of conflict, to support women who are displaced, to support humanitarian initiatives directed in particular at women. So the Women, Peace and Security agenda was to be a strong part of the work we would do. We also acknowledged in 2019 that 2020 would signal 25 years since the Beijing platform of action, and of course would signal the beginning of the implementation of the Generation Equality Forum practical action. The UN Generation Equality Forum is, I believe, one of the most promising international women's agendas since the Beijing Platform for Action. It is made more important by the advocacy and leadership young women worldwide have taken up in it. These young women, civil society organizations, business leaders, supported by our own Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, the Executive Director of UN Women. They've all decided they wish to be, these young women, the generation that concretizes the achievement of gender equality. Talking to them in September 2019, they boldly said to us, "We don't want to be, when we are your age, talking about gender equality. We want to have achieved it. We are the generation equality leaders." The initiative through the Generation Equality Forum has highlighted important priorities while we grapple with COVID-19. As has been said by other speakers, gender-based violence and femicide emerged very clearly through the pandemic as global challenges that all societies have to combat effectively and in unity. In conversation with my colleagues in Chile and Mexico, I learned that gender-based violence had increased during lockdowns in their countries, just as it increased in our own country during the lockdown. We used our awareness of these matters and of the generation equality agenda to insert into the program of the African Union and the African response to COVID-19 while we served in 2020 as chair of the African Union. Working through the African Union and led by our President Ramaphosa, we developed a coordinated and coherent response to the pandemic that we ensured was consistently monitored, that we ensured involved all member states and kept them informed and involved by using all regional and continental structures on the continent. As chair of the African Union, South Africa also inserted the priority of a gender-based violence combat response by the African Union and placed this squarely as the responsibility of the heads of state and made this part of the AU agenda. We also promoted as South Africa the decade 2020 to 2030 as the decade of the financial inclusion of women in Africa, because we realized that the inequality that confronts women on a daily basis is very, very strongly tied to their unequal access and ownership and control of economic resources. And thus the financial inclusion of women is, we believe, an important part of what needs to be done in order to address the inequality that we are speaking of today. I refer to the Generation Equality Forum because internationally it is the agenda that has drawn the entire globe into the effort to combat gender inequality. All sectors in society are being addressed, all areas of social action, the practice of justice, access to education, equal labor law, access to information communication technology, and many other social sectors. The initiative is also, I believe, valuable in that it draws together the public, the private, and civil society sector and allows us to establish inclusive collaboration and to ensure that all role players make a contribution. While all of us are concerned about the levels of gender-based violence, if we do not incorporate all sectors in our society in fighting this particular blight, we will not succeed to reverse it and eradicate it. So all of us must be involved, and Generation Equality in its organizing and in its work asserts this. In our response to the pandemic, we also found, as we looked at ourselves as Africa, continentally, that our vulnerabilities were very, very openly exposed. And we had clear indicators of areas that we need to address urgently in order to limit the vulnerabilities of the African continent. Our public health systems are weak and inadequate, and we have to find ways of supporting them through increased investment, through expanding the pool of well-trained health professionals, not just nurses and doctors, statisticians, data analysts, biotechnologists, a wide range of fields that many African young people are not yet involved in, needs to be the wide range of responses that our African governments secure the support of our universities in acting on and executing. We also, I believe, note and are aware, as this summit, that debates on treatments, diagnostics, protective equipment also exposed our inadequacies in production, in manufacturing, in research and innovation. And it is clear that for us, as women, as young people, as Africa, there is significant space for innovation capacity building on the African continent. International debates have signaled that vaccines, once produced, must become a public good, available to everyone equally. And yet we see the emerging vaccine nationalism, where countries have ordered triple the number of vaccines they will require to vaccinate the entire population, and where wealth has meant access, and poverty means inclusion. This vaccine nationalism and inequality directly says to Africa, we must never allow ourselves to be in a position where we rely on global goodwill to access new treatments or diagnostics. We need to develop our own capacity and learn to produce that which we need. If we do not do so, we will forever be vulnerable and dependent on others. Part of what our governments also had to do in the COVID-19 response was to develop emergency economic relief measures. And if we compare what we were able to do on the continent in comparison to our global partners, we would accept that as Africa, we had very little room for economic maneuver. So, for example, in South Africa and several other countries on the continent, while support was found for formal industries, for workers in formal employment, women who are in high-risk economic sectors were hard hit by inequitable access, in fact, no access to business relief, nor to financial sector support. Women in these sectors, who often provide a livelihood to their families that is absent from any other provider, found themselves totally invisible and marginalized as economic relief measures were devised. Women, as has been said, lost employment opportunities in larger numbers than men. And as the ILO has recently reported, the position of women as earners of a livelihood has been severely worsened by the pandemic. This is added to the burden of unpaid care work, unequal access to professional careers, and unequal pay for equal work for women. Leadership by us as political leaders, as business leaders, as diplomats, post the pandemic, requires focused attention to these forms of discrimination. I think time has come for us to no longer describe the problem, but to attend to it. Countries such as Spain, Norway, and Chile have passed laws that outlaw these abuses, and we should ensure women have similar protection in South Africa and on the African continent. In conversation with my colleague, women ministers in international relations, I asked them about how they address gender inequality. And they've given me a slew of legislation, of regulations that their countries adopt, the requirements for the private sector to ensure greater responsiveness, board membership requirements, and other laws that attend to the inequality all of us are speaking of today. I think as South Africa and as African women leaders, we need to address the nature of regulatory frameworks that support the achievement of equality for women. I also think we need to see greater women leadership in research, development, and innovation. More women in information technology. More women in sectors that are considered scarce skill areas that are often not a priority for women to play a role in or for them to take up study in. As vice chancellors, and I'm really excited about the vice chancellor of UNISA and the other women vice chancellors in our country, we should pay attention. How many women are there in engineering, in science, in information communication technology, and in economics? And post the bachelor's degree, where they do tend to be present, how many are present in honors programs, how many in masters, and how many proceed to the PhD? I think what the pandemic has taught us is that there are significant signs, evidence, enduring characteristics of inequality. But the fact that we were able to respond, the fact that the consequence on our continent wasn't as many believed it would be, means that there is a capability that we need to marshal in order to ensure we do effectively build the ability not to be at risk in future. And if we can do this, led by women, I believe we build a sustainable foundation for the future progress of the African continent. And I thank you very much, Program Director, for this opportunity. Thank you.
It's a massive acknowledgement and thank you to our Honourable Minister, Dr. Naledi Pandor. Ladies and gentlemen, firstly allow me to apologize. We are running slightly behind schedule, so I'm going to exercise what I call my moderator superpowers. And what that means is that I'm going to change the program around a little bit. But what I do want to do is I do want to acknowledge a very special lady, a very special South African who's taken our brand to the global stage. Her name is Motsepe. She has put for us together a really amazing piece of entertainment that we're going to enjoy a little bit later. What we're going to do now is we're going to go into our parallel sessions. Now, if you're wanting to listen in and participate in the youth leadership conversation, that's going to be happening in this very room in plenary. So you're going to stay put and make sure that if you're on the app or if you're on the web browser, you are now clicking on the youth leadership session, which is where that session is going to be happening. However, if you are wanting to participate in the women leadership session, that is going to be happening in the room straight out of this main door, just on the other side of the corridor if you're with us physically. If you're with us online, on the app or on the web browser, all you need to do is just click on your schedule and click the women leadership session that's going to start shortly. So I hope those directions are clear. I'm not going to stay on this stage. I'm going to go join the women leadership panel on the other end, and I'm going to invite Tumelo to come back on stage as she moderates the youth leadership panel. I'll see you shortly. Thank you.